Hi, this is Dr. Nick. I'm the Incrementalist here with incremental insights for a better business and better health.
And I'm Fred Goldstein with Accountable Health, here helping businesses reopen during the COVID pandemic. So Nick, there are a lot of issues going on now with testing and the systems, et cetera. I know you've had some experience and thoughts on this. Why don't you give a little bit of that to some of the folks who've been listening to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think no better way of sort of experiencing it than to go through it. And I've been on both sides of this particular coin, actually delivering tests, volunteering in my local community, where thankfully we've moved from individuals only being tested who feel sick or have a reason. And that was not because we didn't want to test, but because we didn't have enough tests, we didn't have accuracy in testing, to, hey, we're opening this up. And it was an outdoor event. It was in the car, done with, full PPE and so forth. And there were a number of things that really stood out to me. First of all, dear God, we were as busy as hell. I mean, we actually processed 103 people. And I know this because I counted the forms at the end of it. I didn't have time to count. And that was, everybody stayed in their car. And the majority of that was the saliva test, because that's what we had. And interestingly, it actually provides a more accurate read. But for those people that couldn't produce saliva or had some problems, we did also an oral swab, or replaced it with an oral swab. But what stood out to me, first of all, was the never-ending line of people that kept coming. The vast majority of people were extraordinarily nice. There was a wide range of folks from, pre-screening for schools. They were required, schools and colleges and universities. But think about this from a process and flow. And we had 7 stations, total of 700 or so. That's a drop in the ocean when you think about this from a scaling standpoint. How on earth do we do this and scale it up? Because ultimately, I can't say what the perfect standard is, because there probably isn't one, but we need to be testing really frequently. And I'm thinking almost daily as something that we do. And I know you've had some thoughts about this in terms of the types of testing. I know I have. It's about rapid turnaround. If we'd had the test, and in fact, one of the people asked me, because the way the spit test works is you have to twist the cap, and then the preservative drops down, and it's a colored liquid. And they asked me, oh, do I get my read? And I hadn't even thought about it, but that made sense. You learned a lot through the whole experience with the questions and answers and so forth. And no, that wasn't. But wouldn't that be a great thing that they have that read immediately? Because now you've got instant feedback.
So how do we get there? What's sort of happening in the science around that to try to get us to this more rapid result, and turnaround so you can do something right then and there?
Well, huge progress going on, and progress of both testing. I mean, I've certainly talked about this. I know you have, and certainly the folks that I've been working with. I describe it as the pregnancy test kit for COVID-19 that you can do at home. We've got some home base, but it's a little bit more involved and it has to be shipped off. But we're talking like a dipstick approach and a read that comes, and it sounds far-fetched, but it's not. We've actually got, I think, a target and direction to be able to achieve that with the science and the technology. And that now means you could essentially do this as a dipstick test before you go out in the morning. And gosh, you show up positive, you stay home, you self-isolate, contact trace from 2 days previously based on everything that we know. And now suddenly we shut this down. The R naught goes to well below 1, which would be fantastic.
Absolutely. And you raise an interesting logistical point that, as you've talked about, this whole thing is sort of around logistics and how do you create the system around that to make it work. So now if you're doing at-home test kits and you're getting your results at home, in all the cases I understand it, the labs are reporting those positive results back to public health departments. So now you're missing that connection The individual needs to report it. So that's going to require education, some way for the public health departments to accept that notification, some way for someone to begin contact tracing, and creating a new flow and system to do that. Really an amazing issue, but obviously something that if we could get it going, like you said, would tamp this baby down.
It's absolutely on our path. So testing is one of the three basic T's in all of this. And, you know, you're right. It does require some, you know, it's a bit like wearing a face covering. You know, it's the right thing to do. When you get a positive test, you need to report that because then we need to do the contact tracing. But what comes with that is there's no punitive. So it's a no fault. Gosh, you have COVID-19. Wow, that's thanks for letting us know, not, oh my God, you know, this terrible reaction. We've got to behave as a society that is pulling in the right direction. It's just, you know, so important. But let's talk about colleges, because I know you've been looking at, you know, getting back to school safely and, you know, the change that we discussed last week with aerosols, but there's some interesting ideas around that, right?
Yeah, and you and I have been involved with this for a while now and helping these schools and universities reopen. And it's really about, as you've said, it's a positive approach. How do we solve these issues? How do we create environments, given the current situation, that allow us to do things and go forward? Wear a mask, keep your distance. So I found this interesting group out in California. There's a coalition now formed that is saying, let's move the schools outdoors. Let's do this where we know it's safer. And they're now doing weekly phone calls, and I'm hoping to learn some from them and participate in this. And they're mapping out how you would do this. And interestingly, this morning I was talking to somebody about it, and I mentioned it, and they said, oh my gosh, my best experiences in school were the teachers who took us outside, who we sat around underneath a tree and talked about something. And there are ways to do this. We're seeing universities begin to put up tents and things like that. And obviously, you've still got to consider, are you walling in that tent? How do you flow the air? There's issues with rain. There's issues with heat. But all of those can be overcome if we're thoughtful about it. And you can have it, as I talked about on their website, you can go ahead. They hold outdoor classes in the north, you know, so you can do it when it's cold. You can do it when it's hot. Sure, there are some issues, but that may be a really fascinating approach to try to solve this problem.
Yeah, it's funny how fantastic fresh air is in terms of combating this disease. And by the way, fresh air is really good for you. So this has all sorts of positive silver lining benefits, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So another interesting to consider, I think we'll see more and more of that, the restaurants in the streets, with their seating and stuff. But that's really a unique way to begin to say, we can get these kids back. Let's move this stuff outside, which is not no risk, but obviously much, much safer. The key is to reduce these risks. So with that, again, Nick, it's been another fantastic week talking to you. This is Fred Goldstein with Accountable Health.
And this is Dr. Nick. I'm the incrementalist here with incremental insights for a better business and a better health.